Clock again. Check this YouTube stream. All right, I think we are up on YouTube here. So as we wait to have everybody come and join us, and also wait for my assistant Heather to let me know that we sound good here. Yeah, as I was doing my research on you, I know that you moved around a lot growing up, and you may have been too young at this point. You lived in Maryland for a little while?
I did in Silver Spring and Frederick.
Ah, nice. Yes, I'm originally from Maryland, and first place I lived was Laurel, so not too far from that area.
Yeah. I think is there like a concert venue in Laurel?
Close by, Meriwether Post Pavilion.
Meriwether Post Pavilion. Yeah. So I was in high school, and we went that's where we went to the concerts. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, actually, I think that was my first concert there too.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So I lived there from like 85 to 87, maybe.
Okay. Yeah. So I think we got there actually probably around that same time. Yes, I was really young at that point, so I don't fully remember it when we were living in Laurel. But no, I love the Maryland area though. I love New York a lot better, which I know you lived here too.
Yeah. Where are you in New York?
Hell's Kitchen. So this is one of our studios. I say one of them. That's aspirational. So one of our studios is here in Times Square, and then I also live on 44th and 10th. So I know you did some work on 43rd and 8th. So
43rd and 8th.
We were right around the same neighborhood.
Yeah, the Times Square Hotel, right next to the old Times Square building, or New York Times building, was where my offices were. Yeah, in the basement. In the basement. Yep.
Yeah, we're definitely gonna get into that. I know that's where you're working on homelessness, and there's so much around here, especially being around that Port Authority area. So all right, I think we're ready to go here. So those of you here watching us on YouTube Live, we're here with Becky Margiotta, and let's say that right, Becky Margiotta.
Yeah.
And first of all, I should welcome you back here to another conversation of entrepreneur struggle, where each week or each sporadic time that we come live here as we work on these busy schedules of entrepreneurs, we're talking about how these creators, these founders have started their businesses, scaled them up, and not just entrepreneurs, freelancers, which I know is also part of Becky's journey and being a consultant. When we're running our own businesses, when we're running our lives, that also is being an entrepreneur. So, if you're an entrepreneur yourself, if you have other freelance friends or entrepreneurial friends, please invite them here to the live stream, where we actually want to be able to take your questions, take your comments as we talk here. I have my computer up here in front of me, so I can actually see your comments, and at times be able to jump in and ask Becky some of the questions that might be on your mind, especially if you're in that activism space. Becky's done a lot of incredible work as an activist, and we're going to get into that journey. But as a founder, she started the Billions Institute, which we're going to talk a lot about here, but also the Social Change Agency in the past. And I want to get into that, but she's also an author and the host of a great podcast called Unleashing Social Change. And the book is called Impact with Integrity, Repair the World Without Breaking Yourself. So you're doing so much in this space. And so I want to kind of first start with, you started but in your adult life and in your career, started in the Army. How did you go from the Army to now working on social change? It's not necessarily the mode of that's not the path I would think someone would take to get into activism.
No, it's an unusual path. When I was my plebe year at West Point, they ask you, Canis, that was my maiden name, where are you going to be in 10 years? And I was like, I'm going to be in the Peace Corps, sir. And they were like, oh God, and they were like, hazing me for that. And I have always felt this call to service, which took me to West Point in the first place. But how I got out of that into specifically working directly on social change, I served for 9 years, but the whole time I kept to myself that I identified as a gay woman. And it was before and during the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy. So I couldn't tell the truth about who I was. And it just got to a point where I didn't want to lie about that anymore. So I resigned my commission, and I didn't go directly into social service. I was a stockbroker for a while. And I felt kind of lost. I went through a difficult breakup, and I had a puppy that died. And the puppy that died was kind of the final straw, where I was like, okay, from now on, I'm only going to do things that I have zero ambivalence about. And within a matter of weeks, I found my way to Times Square working for Roseanne Hegarty. Just total luck.
And so the work that you were doing here in Times Square, I know a lot of the work you were doing early in that activism space was around homelessness. Can you talk about, I guess, what you were really focusing on here in New York? As many major cities around the country and around the world have a lot of homelessness issues. So what were you working on to try to help in that facet?
Yeah, so my boss was her name is Roseanne Haggerty. She's just brilliant genius woman, and she had a lot of supportive housing, which is housing for people who had experienced homelessness and low income housing combined with social supports. And she had the most of that in New York City. She's like, I got tons of housing. Why am I walking past the same people on 43rd Street every day? And what's going on here? And she learned about that England had something they called the Rough Sleepers Initiative, and that they were able to get rough sleeping down by 75% in 4 or 5 years.
And what's rough sleeping? I'm sorry.
Street homelessness. That's their euphemism for street homelessness. And so she said, well, if they can do that here, how can we do that? Or if they can do that there, how can we do that here? And so she went from being a supportive housing developer and provider to saying, let's actually crack the nut on what's going on in street homelessness. And for whatever reason, and this is part of her genius, she was like, I think I need someone with a military background. I mean, everybody else would be like, I need a social worker, I need whatever. But Roseanne had it in her brain somehow. I need someone who knows logistics, which I didn't even do logistics. It just was like, I feel like it was one of those moments that was kind of grace meant to be. But as soon as I was at that same time really desperate to do something I felt zero ambivalence about, but I didn't know any really thing about homelessness. I had sort of an uncarved block, just open mind and curiosity and a commitment to it. And she just set me loose in Times Square. And my job was to get street homelessness in Times Square down by 2/3 in 3 years.
Wow, that's a lot.
And we did. We got it down we needed 1 more year. We needed 4 years, but we got it down by 87%. This was in 2003 to like the 2007 timeframe, the team that I got to work with. So I hired them all, and they were amazing. And I did hire social workers, and so other cities saw, oh, wow, Times Square in 2007 looked markedly different from Times Square in 2004, 2000. It was, massively different. And other cities were like, how'd you do that? And so we started doing these like kind of mini trainings to teach them how we did it. And then we started going to those cities to help them do it. And the 100,000 Homes campaign grew out of years and years of working with dozens of cities and doing the work myself with my team on Times Square. And it aggregated everything we knew to create some large scale social change in the homelessness sector.
It's so interesting that you started at least in the activism space, started on homelessness, because that actually was how I wanted to start DCP. The whole original idea was I was going to do this homeless documentary series because I wanted to help end homelessness, but I was looking at it in the way of like, how do we plug the hole? As we're emptying water out, as what you all were doing, like how do we plug the hole? And I remember this video of like these homeless people in Orlando, and they're all holding up these signs. And they're just talking about like how they became homeless or what they did in their career before they became homeless. And there's doctors, there's NFL players, there's a woman saying like, I chose to be homeless over my husband abusing my children. I got cancer. And it's like, you notice that all of us, many of us, I won't say all, but many of us are just one piece of bad luck, one medical bill, one death in the family away from becoming homeless. So, with that understanding, working with homeless people, did it maybe change your outlook on the world or, within your career that, just working with them maybe changed some certain aspects of what your trajectory became?
Oh, hugely, Chris. And by the way, I haven't seen that video, but it sounds very moving. And I love that you're committed to that issue as well. I had an open mind. My preconceived notions coming from the military was somewhat probably more conservative, like we'll probably help them get jobs. That was just my assumption. And then I went out on the streets and listened to people and said, hey, what's up? What's going on? And I watched the paid outreach teams walk past people. And I'd say, why'd you just walk past that person? They'd say, they don't want help. And I'm like, how do you know? They just don't want what you're offering. They don't want shelter or a sock. But, and I would go back and say, do you want housing? Or what do you want? And they'd say, I want my own apartment. So again and again and again, we heard people say they wanted their own apartment. But because our team was so small, I was literally doing direct human services myself. So, someone comes in Friday night would always happen Friday night, just before we were about to call it a day. Someone comes in and wants to go into drug treatment. And we're like, all right, we're doing this, and we would go with them to St. Luke's Hospital, right? We would go with them down to St. Vincent's, wherever there was an opening. And we had to stay with them until they got admitted, because the hospital would just give them some aspirin and send them on their way. And like, okay, there goes your Friday night. But like, I spent years sort of accompanying people through the really crappy chutes and ladders game that people have to navigate. But it changed me. I had just gone through a difficult breakup, and I think started it in some ways feeling sorry for myself. And probably there were layers of white saviorism into this too, but there was something about the suffering that I saw people experiencing on the streets was orders of magnitude worse than what I was suffering. And it just, many nights on the way home, I would find myself sobbing and crying. Like I'd take the train home, and I'd get on that kind of dark walk from wherever the train led off to my apartment. I would just feel these sobs coming up. And in a weird way, there was this healing in it for me of like, well, at least I'm not feeling sorry for myself anymore. You know what I mean? Like, and it wasn't even pity. It was compassion. It was, God, I can't believe how difficult this must be for this person, the pain that they're in. And so it did change me. I think it healed my heart in some ways. And then in so many other ways of just understanding systems and structures and how they're designed to fail people, and not to be a total bummer. But, I think when I first started I think I looked at things, and again, I think this is due to like 53 years of conditioning as a white person, but like as like individual, like, well, they, like, could they make different choices? Not entirely, but that was sort of part of my mindset. But now, not to in any way deny that we all have agency and we all have choices, and some are good and some are bad, but no bad choice should result in you like not having a place to go to the bathroom or to lay your head without being worried about someone kicking you or setting you on fire. I mean, there's no amount of bad decisions that should, especially if you're not hurting anybody or anything. And some would argue, even if you're, there's no decisions that should result in that being your experience in a country where we have this much.
Well, I think you bring up a really great point too, in terms of like when you were talking to them, you talked to them. You didn't try to helicopter in and say that this is what you need. You actually talked to them and asked them, what do you need? And I think in conversations I've had with people who have been homeless, or even like in the foster care system, a lot of times, like you said, they just want a home, because that really is the first step in getting a job. Like if you don't have an address, you can't get a job. You can't do a lot of things. And so like that really is that first step, putting them into a place where now they can actually go out and be a part of the world. But you need a home to actually be part of the world.
Absolutely. And we saw that again and again and again. But because of this, like kind of like Protestant work ethic is so ingrained in our society, what I found out the longer I did the work was I would go to people and say, hey, what do you need? What do you want? And sometimes they would say, I need a job. And I'd be like, no, that's not what you need. You need a house first so you can go to your job, so you can have an alarm clock and, take a shower and do all the things you need to do. And so we would sort of disabuse them of the notion that they needed a job first, and so, and not to be paternalistic in any way, but yes, the foundation of the program was in listening, just total open-ended questions. And we learned because people told us.
Well, you also mentioned too, like going home and like feeling so down and crying and just really taking on so much of that emotion, because you're dealing in so much trauma and pain. Like the stories I can only imagine that you had to hear of what these people have been through. It sounded like early on, and maybe it's still the case, like it was hard for you to separate your own emotions out of that. Was there eventually a point for you where you were able to kind of give yourself some separation, like still be empathetic, but still give yourself some separation in terms of taking on that energy at the same time?
Yeah, I think over time, and as my own heart healed, then I could be like, okay, I'm going to show up. This is 100% for them, and I'm going to take care of myself, right? That's some of that balance. But even as I was working on the 100,000 Homes campaign, like every minute I wasn't like on a phone call or traveling to a city or doing something like that was a minute that like a city wasn't housing 50 or 100 people a day. But there was, as I lived in downtown LA, and there was this dude that would sleep outside my apartment down by 11th and Grand. And I'd go get my coffee every day, and I'd be like, oh, I got to do it. And it takes a lot of time to work with one person, but I couldn't not. especially knowing who I knew and the social capital I had at that point. But there's like over time, I feel like there, in some ways, when working at the larger scale, I felt like I had to almost carve that off so that I could focus at the scale level. And that also doesn't feel good, right? To not just stop and help everybody who's in front of you if you can, you know? And so, and that guy did get into housing thanks to this wonderful woman, Molly Lowry, and her program. And so, yeah, it got better over time, to answer your original question. Sorry, I blabbed on there.
Oh, no, not at all. Please. No, I thought that was an excellent point. And I also, I'm interested to, you went from, being in the service to now being a civilian and civilian business life. Were there challenges going from, that very, I'm assuming very structured service industry into now working, in the civilian world?
Two major, huge differences from military to civilian world, in particular to the nonprofit sector. One is the military is set up so that there are non-commissioned officers and commissioned officers. And the non-commissioned officers are the backbone of the Army. They run the place. They know how it works. They've been there forever. And then the commissioned officers, like little bright-eyed, bushy-tailed idiots like me, come out of West Point thinking we know something. And if you're lucky, the non-commissioned officer takes you under their wings and says, hey, listen, LT, this is how it is, and you listen, right? Listen again. If you're arrogant, then they sabotage you, right? If you're like, I know everything, they're like, watch this, and they kind of make you look stupid or fail. So, but as you progress, and there's this almost like, I hate to use cop illustrations, but like there's like a good cop, bad cop. So you always have a partner and you can divide and conquer on the roles and responsibilities. And sometimes I'd be the good guy. Sometimes I'd be the bad guy. We'd just be like, okay, let's do this. And I had like, it's almost like you have two leaders together working in sync with each other. You don't have that in the civilian sector, or by most designs. The other thing is the military spends so much money training people and begging anybody to be part of it, for God's sakes, that let's say someone's not doing well, their performance is poor, that they can't pass the PT test, they can't do it, or they have a disciplinary problem, whatever the case may be. All of the culture in the military is like, your job as a leader is to retain that soldier. Like if you have to get up at 4 a.m. and go running with him so he can pass the weight test, that's your job. Like, it is your responsibility to make sure everybody can keep their job and can serve. And everybody who was like let go, 99% of people let go, was almost seen as like a loss, right? But in the civilian sector, I went into it with that mindset and I was like, I can't fire anybody. I've got to make it work. I've got to figure it out. And one of the like really hard lessons that I had to learn was in the civilian sector, it's just, that's not how it works. Like I think it's really important to be in the times when we do have to fire people or choose to fire people, we don't have to fire anybody. But in the times when we do choose to let someone go, even if it's ourselves, that we do so in a way that's human-centered, ethical, and especially if we're the ones who changed our minds, that we do our best to make sure it doesn't cause financial harm to them. But that, it's just much more part of the mix in the civilian world to fire people. And that's been really hard for me. It's always hard for me to fire people. I wish it was easy.
And you also kind of mentioned like firing yourself. And yeah, firing never gets easy, but yeah, especially when you're firing yourself, that's not easy. And I guess that kind of leads me into, you created the Social Change Agency or co-founded that. And so can you talk about what led to the creation of that and also then why you stopped doing that?
Yeah. So, okay. Well, I was the director of the 100,000 Homes campaign. I learned from the Hendricks Institute this concept of genius, which is like, what are you great at? What do you love doing? What do you lose track of time? And I tracked for 7 weeks what my genius was versus my not genius. And I realized that on average, over 7 weeks, I was serving in my capacity as the director of the 100,000 Homes campaign, 42% in my genius. And I was like, these are the things that I can roll out of bed and do, and I'm great. It's great every time. These are the things that, like, I'm not at the top of my license. I'm not the best. There's other people on the team that are better. So I went to my boss, Roseanne, such an entrepreneurial person. I said, how about this? Take me a pay cut. Let me go to 80%. I'll work 4 days a week instead of 5. And only have me do these things. And let's carve out these things that I'm bad at to these 3 other people, give them the money you took away from me, and everybody's going to be happy. And Roseanne was like, done. And so for the last year or so of the 100,000 Homes campaign, I had 1 day a week free to build my own next business. And the social change agency was taking things I had learned about conscious leadership and specifically applying them in the social sector with my team. And my wife and I co-founded it together, of who she also works a lot in social change, of how can we teach people how to apply these skills for doing social change from a place of integrity with conscious leadership. And it was just a side hustle, the whole, and when the 100,000 Homes campaign concluded, I was like, well, I guess I'll just do the social change agency. I'll just ramp up to full time and try to build out that business. Can I tell you a little story about how the Billions Institute got founded, though? It's just, so at the end of the 100,000 Homes campaign, I got a call from or an email from the TED Prize people. And they said, Becky, you're a finalist for the TED Prize. You need to submit your wish for the world in 50 words or less. And if we really like your wish, we're going to give you $1 million. And I thought for sure it was a prank. I thought my team was playing a prank. And then I realized it was real, like we're like trying to yank the wig off of somebody, in an Austin Powers movie. And I found it was real. And I was like, oh, there must be like 500 finalists. There were 13. Like, I really should have taken it more serious. But they said, call your friends, don't put it on social media, but call your friends, get your wish for the world. And so I called Joe McCannon, one of several people. And I was like, dude, they're going to want me to do homelessness. I was like, I care about it, but I feel like I kind of, like, I get it. You know what I mean? Like, I want to pass the baton on to other people, because it's not intellectually as stimulating to me. I feel like I got it. And it's now I'm just irritated, that it still exists. And which, people do need to continue on the work. And I'm so grateful that people do. And he said, yeah, you could do like the Million Homes campaign. I was like, yeah, I don't want to. And I was like, what I really want to do is start a school that teaches people how to do social change. And Joe was like, I want to start a country. And I was like, dude, that's cool. And he's like, yeah, I want to start a virtual country where like people pull resources and exercise direct democracy. And I was like, dude, that's cool. And he's like, do you want to put my wish in? And I was like, dude, it's your wish. But I went with my heart, and I was like, I want to put a school on how to do large scale social change, and teach people how to do the things that I did in the 100,000 Homes campaign, but in other sectors and other arenas, stopping human trafficking, spreading solutions to blindness, whatever the case may be. And I didn't get the prize, and of course they were expecting me to do something on homelessness. And, but I called Joe the day after we spoke and said, I was like, dude, I don't really want the TED Prize. That's like $1 million pair of handcuffs. If you're going to do something big in the world, $1 million isn't even enough. And he was like, yeah, it's really true. And I was like, I think I want to go into business with you. You want to hang out a shingle? And Joe was like, I was thinking the same thing. So Joe, who's Mr. Large Scale Change, he had done 100,000 Lives campaign in healthcare. We really, on that phone call, the Billions Institute, really, the way we combined it came into being. And then I just wrapped everything I was excited about in the social change agency into the Billions Institute, and we let the social change agency go.
Nice. Well, and that's where sometimes you have to pivot, because your goal isn't just, and I've talked about this with other founders, your goal isn't necessarily just success. It's trying to accomplish something in the world. And so you found a better way to accomplish what you're trying to, the change that you're trying to create. And so now you're pivoting the business into something different to be able to affect that change.
Absolutely. And Joe, a couple of weeks later, Joe was out in LA, and we did like our first retreat, just the two of us, in the conference room of my apartment complex. And so I have this exercise that I know, and I help others do, of like, what's your high dream? What's your biggest vision for what we could do? And Joe just off the cuff was like, I don't know. Like, I mean, what if in the next 20 years we help people solve some of the world's biggest problems? And I was like, I like that. and then we were off to the races. And that became our purpose, was like, how can we help people who have solutions to really vexing and complicated social problems, spread those solutions to everyone who can benefit. And the people who need it most are usually the last to get it. So how can we help, really, as a matter of justice, get solutions to everyone who could possibly benefit, and people have the muscle for how to do large scale change.
Nice. And if you're just joining us here on YouTube, we are talking to Becky Margiotta, who is a founder of the Billions Institute, also the social change agency, but also she's an author, podcaster. I'm sure there's gonna be other accolades that we're gonna, talk about in the future as you continue to expand your activist empire. But also, like, what you've done has been featured in places like 60 Minutes, the New York Times. You've been awarded the White House Champion of Change Award and the Schwab Foundation Social Entrepreneur of the Year. Like, very accomplished when it comes to credits. And I know that's not why you do it, but it's also interesting, as I was looking through some of those credits, I also noticed that there was, I guess a CBS Evening News piece that, really was around the work that you all were doing in California, but it was also around the work that other people were doing. And yet, unfortunately, something that was supposed to be really great for, really elevating what you all were doing turned into something that was kind of negative in terms of you working with these other organizations, because CBS unfortunately gave you guys maybe more credit than what you all had wanted. And so can you maybe tell, I'm being very ambiguous about telling this. I want you to tell the story. But can you talk about that story and also let me know, how did you manage that? Because that sounded like a really tough experience.
It was such a nightmare. So, credit and recognition are such an important thing. And this guy, Don Berwick, he says, credit is infinitely divisible. Like, you want to be someone who gives credit and recognition, not seeks credit and recognition. And that just wasn't really on my radar. We were just like, hey, let's try to get the word out, let's try to get the word out. And CBS Evening News, we got them, and they followed us around and they saw what we were doing, which all we were doing was helping communities using a methodology, really identify by name and do some sort of triage of everybody who's out on the streets, who for really most of the part they had left to die, right? And so and then they were housing people. But this 60 Minutes piece, and it didn't even occur to us to manage it closely. But when it ran, they said, "Oh, can we get someone who's in housing?" And we're like, "Oh yeah, go talk to St. Joseph Center in Venice." And when it ran. And they didn't do their fact checking, or they're just kind of sloppy in their journalism, but they made it look like my team had housed the people that St. Joseph Center had housed. So we unwittingly got credit for something that they did. And, trust is so important. I mean, it really set our relationships back a long time. It said, and I can swear on 1,000 Bibles that was not our intention or whatever. But I think when there's a context where credit and recognition is so important and so essential, and there's so much scarcity in the nonprofit sector, that credit and recognition is so essential to them and their work. And we just blew it. We blew it bad. And it not only did that harm that relationship, which we ended up repairing, but then the county supervisor in LA who oversaw, these county supervisors have more power than God, who oversaw all of Western Los Angeles, where there's tons of homelessness occurs, went around and told other organizations not to partner with us because we'll take credit for their work. Yep. And we're like, this is ground zero of homelessness. And now we have the elected official telling people, or their deputy, their person running around telling people not to partner with us. And we're like, it was really, it was a very, very difficult, disaster. But when we did the 60 Minutes piece, we learned from it. And we were like, this cannot be about us. We need to be the postscript. This needs to be about how great Nashville is doing. And that one turned out really well.
And I wanted to bring it up too, because I think in this journey as an entrepreneur, again, even if you're just freelancing, a lot of times there's things that happen that are out of your control in terms of how it can negatively affect your business. And so in that moment, I can only imagine watching that piece and being super excited. And then all of a sudden, you see something like, oh my God, you just start sweating. How do you go from shock to now going in action of how do I go on the offense when I'm very much defensive right now?
Oh yeah. We were eating the popcorn and oh my, and they were like, oh no. And right away on the phones. I think it's so much, there's something about an impulse to turn toward, to face what's happening and turn towards others with authenticity and sincerity and curiosity and humility, that just, you can't go wrong, again and again and again, even if they're not oh my God, I totally understand. Here's some rainbows and some unicorns. It was hard on the relationship, but I do think the instinct to turn toward with humility and curiosity and sincere apology is essential again and again and again in life, right? Because we're going to get knocked around. That comes with the territory.
No, that's true. And yeah, I think sometimes, I know if I was in that situation, I might, the first reaction might be, oh, I need to get defensive and be like, oh no, this wasn't us, blame, CBS Evening News. But then, what good does that really do? Focusing on the positive, how can we move forward is where you have to go. But it can be tough to try to get yourself into that mind state.
Oh, totally. And you're so right, because looking back, like we were like, oh my God, that was CBS Evening News. And they didn't even believe us. I mean, they were like, yeah, right. And I was like, no, I swear to God, and so, right. The blame was just, in retrospect, it would have been better, but like, I am just heartstruck that this happened. How can we make it right? How can we make it right?
Yeah.
And versus like, I can't believe CBS Evening News did that. Yeah, you're so right about that, Chris.
Yeah, sometimes you have to, even when it's not your fault, you take it on yourself to say, how can I be better, or how can we move, or how can I be part of that change to help us all moving forward?
Amen. Yeah.
And you mentioned too, with both of the businesses that you founded, working with your wife. And can you talk a little bit about like maybe some of the benefits of working with your partner, but also the downsides that could come from that? I know I come from a family that had, family working in family business, and that can sometimes be a strain on personal relationships.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think any issues that you have in your relationship will come out wherever you are, right? And so we had a thing with my partner and I where I'm more extroverted and she's more introverted, and I'll kind of talk first, and then she's one of those people who waits for there to be a gap in the conversation before she inserts herself. And then sometimes she just never gets in, and I'm over there like, get in there. You have better things to say than I do, and she's like, like, well, if you'd be quiet, I could, and so there have been many times where we're like co-facilitating or, teaching together where I've had to learn how to really make space for people, not in a way that doesn't like that they can't do that themselves or anything, but like that I've had to learn how to step back some, because truly she has massive wisdom to share, but her MO is different. So her social MO is different. So that's been the main thing we've had to sort out. There are plenty of times where I was like, why didn't you say something? And she's like, why didn't you shut up?
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
I do that even it's not my partner or my chief operating officer at DCP. Like a lot of times I can get in that mode. We'll be on a call and like I'll go off on like a 30-minute monologue. And then I'm like, you want to add something? It's like, you just said everything. What did you leave for me to say? And I'm like, oh yeah, I did it again. My fault.
Totally. No, I get that. I'm guilty of that myself many times.
You also mentioned early on too, like obviously you started working around the homelessness aspect, but then as you were talking about, not wanting to just focus there, you had these other aspirations of focusing on human trafficking and climate change, racial justice, education. How do you balance trying to accomplish all you want in the world without taking on too much that now you're not accomplishing anything or just running yourself into the ground?
Yeah. So I think it's self-care, and not like, not in a fake way. Like here's how I've made it work for me. And this is like massive privilege, right? We've lucked out of the gate with me and Joe and I co-founded Billions Institute together. And we've never been, there've been a couple times where I've been like, kind of like biting my nails about revenue coming in, but we've been busy. Like there is a genuine need, and we've been able to sort it out to where we've had a profitable business every year. But the pandemic, the first year of the pandemic was a gut punch, right? But that was true for everybody.
But you do a lot of in-person events, and that's why that had such a large strain on your business. 100% of our revenue on March 13th, 2020 was from live in-person events. So we had to pivot hard. But so how I've done it for me and my team, I just try to be human-centered and people-centered. And we've had the luxury of maybe, and this is maybe a bad thing, of not having to be super scrappy. This could be our downfall, right? Like we're busy and we're doing things, but we can pace ourselves. So for me personally, it works really well because we've got an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old, and I want to be there for their childhood. But all of these really intensive kind of bursts of 3 weeks in a row in the UK training the National Health Service, but we're generating a lot of our revenue in that really intensive work. And then I'm home for 2 months with, and do stuff. Somehow my calendar just fills up every day, but not necessarily with revenue generating things and so for me, it's almost like, I don't know, it's like a snake eating a gopher or something. There's these just big chunks of work where I'm like all in, and then I
I go into like goof off mode and just like let that not be the most important thing. That was really hard to do during the pandemic though. To have like that super intense burst and then spaciousness, which is where the creativity comes from of the next thing for me. Like, okay, I'm going to be productive and then I'm going to be really creative and spacious. It was really hard during the pandemic because we had our kids at home, and my wife and I were both owned or executive directors of businesses. And I had the kids in the afternoons while she worked, and she had the kids in the mornings while I worked. So, our work days got cut in half, and there was just, everybody had to figure that out. Right. But that I wasn't able to do the bursts of work and the spaciousness for, about 18 months. But the rest of the time that works for me.
And I can only imagine that having two kids, you said 6 and 8, like that. Is there a balance that you now try to have with the children and still trying to run these businesses? And or if you're not necessarily balancing, is there a guilt there, like not feeling like you're able to be fully present with them because there's so much else going on?
Yeah, here's what we figured out. So basically what we figured out during the pandemic was like, even though we weren't profitable that one year, we did kind of figure it out to where I was working 4 hours a day. So I got more efficient and was able to focus on the more important things, right? And so now the kids are back in school from 8 to 2, and like poof, all of a sudden I have 2 more hours that I didn't have, And so I've expanded to where my intention is to get what I need to get done to be of service in the world and keep the business running and in a way that's of service and functional, but while the kids are in school. So, and now we have the after school stuff. So it just kind of like, like capitalism and productivity kind of sneaks in, And so I'm like, sometimes I do the walk of shame and I'm the last one to pick them up. But, most days I pick up the kids around 4:30 and then I'm done. And I feel great about that. And then they have my full attention. Like I'm not distracted. I'm not trying to get things done. And this is the other thing I want to share. When you own a small business as an entrepreneur, you're not salaried, which is a blessing and a curse, right? Because when you're salaried, it's just like, hey, you do what you do and you get what you get. But when it's your own business and when you're the business owner, make it, take it. Like I can do more and I can make more money. And yes, I want to distribute that to the employees as well. But my wife and I do this practice where at the end of every year, we say for the next year, how much money is plenty of money for everything we need and want to do next year? And then we put a number to it and we know her salary. So then I'm like, okay, I'm going to go make the difference. Right. Nice. But last year I asked her, because she manages the money. I'm terrible with this stuff. I asked her, I get an allowance and I still blow it. And last year I asked her, how little money can I make? And we're still all right. And, she gave me a number and it was like half of what I used to be doing. And so I've calibrated my business now to almost like min specs, you know what I mean? Like, because I want to optimize for other things, because it can just take it. There's something about it where there's just this sort of more is better in the air that I feel like I have to actively guard against and work against.
Well, and I think I know I kind of went through that too in terms of like just trying to just kind of restructure my life to be able to do all the things that I want to do. And I think, one of the things that you have in your book, and I haven't had a chance to fully read it, but just in everything I was reading in terms of like the feedback on it and the work that you're doing in there really is around teaching others to do what you've done in terms of maybe working 4-hour days so you can really enjoy life, and that will re-energize you for the work that you're going to do and probably make you better in business. Can you talk a little about like what led you to creating this book, Impact with Integrity, Repair the World Without Breaking Yourself, and what maybe that has done for you or for others that have been able to learn from that?
Yeah, so I set out back in early 2019, to write a book about our model for unleashing the way we teach how to do large-scale change. We define success as orchestrating the loss of control of thousands of people you'll never meet, moving in the right direction. And I was like, I'm going to write a book about the model for unleashing. And I got like a month or two into the project and I was like, that's not the book that wants to be written right now. Like, I want to write a book about not about the design part. I want to write a book about the leadership part, because that's what I'm really passionate about. And if I'm going to be talking about things on, like I want to be talking about things I'm like really, 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 really most passionate about. I still want to write the Unleashing book. That's next. But I've done so many executive coaching sessions with social change leaders, nonprofit executives, senior project directors, and seen again and again and again the ways that we get in our own way, and done it myself, that I wanted to like give this gift to people of you don't have to hire me as your coach. Like you can just read this book and this is what I would have told you as a coach, of to do these things and to just kind of capture in one place the things that I found myself again and again and again and again helping people with. I got it all in one place. I feel really by the way, I needed a lot of help to get it done, but I'm very grateful for the help and I feel really, really happy that it's out there. It feels like a little bird flew from the nest, it's its own thing now.
Well, I'm looking forward to reading that. And what I was kind of mentioning before, like I was kind of restructuring my life and I kind of forgot where I was trying to go with that, but I just want to return to that where you were talking about just taking a pay cut to essentially allow the business to do more, but at the same time still allow you to live. But I think another way you can do that, like if you have hobbies. So for myself, like I love taking photography, like I love doing photography. And so now I will sell through Getty or Shutterstock or, even trying to put on my own website. Now that can be passive income that will make me money. So I now can make less money through the business, where I'll do podcasting courses and make money through that. So again, I can pay myself less money through the company, and now that money can go more towards the employees or more towards creating what I want to create. So there's multiple ways to kind of restructure your own pay so that's not all coming out of the business.
I love those ideas. Have you ever heard that saying, you need to make money while you sleep because you sleep a lot? Yes. like that's the dream, right? Passive income.
Sleeping a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Yeah, I'd love to see the links to your photographs, by the way.
I'll definitely make sure I share them. But also, that brings me into self-care, because for me, photography is that self-care. Like that's what forced me to go out in nature. I love taking photography of landscapes, and it forces me to be in the woods alone and just take deep breaths. And if I don't, do photography, a lot of times I'll just be inside working all day. And so again, I'm kind of making also a hobby that makes money for me, but that is my way of self-care. And I know a lot of, obviously in this book, you're teaching people how to do self-care. But I know that even as much as I talk about taking care of yourself and emotional well-being and all that, I still backslide and I'm kind of hypocritical in my own advice at times. Do you find it challenging at times to kind of stay on top of all the things that you do to keep that balance?
Oh, yeah. And it's endemic in the nonprofit sector. There's this great study, Well-Being Inspires Well-Doing, that just the percentage of people who are experiencing burnout or like that their job is detrimental to their mental health is really, it's really high. For me, my greatest self-care is actually attending to my mental and emotional health. Because and like it sounds like for you, being out in wilderness does that. And there, there's like forest baths. Absolutely. Like there's tons of research that just being in wilderness is in and of itself de facto healing and good for your mental health and emotional health. And the part of this, the things that I point to in the book, that if your agreements are off or you have something you want to say, but you just can't get yourself to say it, or somebody's micromanaging you, or you're feeling that kind of oppression of that in some way and you don't know what to do about it. Even for me, even if I'm in a walk in the woods, I'm just ruminating and like bitching to myself in my head about this thing. So a big part of my own kind of practice in mental health is putting into practice the things that are in this book, so that then when I go to the botanic gardens, I can just enjoy it versus just be bitching to myself in my head, because I've spent like way too much time doing that over the years.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up. It's something I've really thought about lately. Like I spend a lot of emotional energy having conversations in my head with somebody without actually having a conversation with that person. I'm taking on all the negative emotion of what could happen negatively in this conversation.
Oh yeah.
Without actually having, and a lot of times I'll have the conversation and it's not negative at all, but I've exerted so much energy just mapping out in my head what's going to happen if I bring this up or have this conversation. So yeah, I realize I have to take a step back and sometimes, and yes, it's good to pre-plan and think about where things might go, but don't harp on it so much that now you've already exhausted yourself before you have the conversation.
Absolutely. I spent literally weeks riding the Q train from Brooklyn into the city, rehearsing quitting to my boss, who I love dearly. Like, I love this woman dearly, but I would have these imaginary conversations in my head of like, she's going to criticize you for that, which maybe she wasn't even criticizing me, right? Like maybe it was just feedback, but I interpreted it as criticism. And then I'm going to be like, but you don't understand. And then she's going to say this, and then I'm going to say that and be like, I quit, and like stomp off. Like I had that conversation like probably 20, 30 times in my head. And then we met. It was like a fine conversation. I'm like, what am I doing this myself? I have in the book, these are the steps for speaking unarguably so that you can speak your truth in a way that has a really high likelihood of resolving the issue instead of making it worse. And it's like step by step, like I have to follow it myself still. Like, okay, what is unarguably true? Because it's an essential skill that can basically get you out of having those conversations in your head all the time.
I like that. Well, I'm looking forward to reading through that myself and then following those guidelines. But I also still want to touch too on the podcast you have, Unleashing the Change podcast. And I know we've kind of come to the end of this current season, but what I really loved about this season was you were talking to your mentors. And actually you started off with actually one of your mentors interviewing you because as you said in that podcast, like these mentor-mentoree relationships are reciprocal. Even if we don't always think of them that way, we can learn from each other, even if you are the mentee, speaking to the mentor. But can you talk about why you had that intention of wanting to have your mentors on this season?
Yeah, so for the first 3 seasons, I interviewed people who are leading large scale change about what they're doing and what they're learning and all that stuff. But in a lot of ways, and I love those interviews and I think they're fascinating and the stuff that people are doing to make the world a better place, they're so cool. But I kind of wanted to get to the dirty laundry, I kind of wanted to get to the real stuff and be more vulnerable, be more true about what's hard, what's going on. And I didn't want to ask Nicole Hockley, who's like the founder of Sandy Hook Promise, whose son was massacred at Sandy Hook, to be like, tell me how you suck. You know what I mean? Like, I just didn't I wanted to focus on her. But I do want to kind of pivot the podcast that way into where it's just kind of a little bit more vulnerable, more raw. And I was thinking about it and I was like, man, my mentors are just the most ballsy people in the world and they don't give a shit. You know what I mean? And so so I'm like, if I just call them, and they were like, yeah, Beck, sign me up, And they all shared something that I was like, oh my God, I didn't even know that about you, so I was like, well, and now what I feel like I can say for season 5 is, if like the assistant secretary for peacekeeping at the United Nations can do this, you can do this. Like, let's be real with each other about what's going on, And so I wanted them to sort of set the bar high, and they delivered for sure.
Oh no, it's beautiful. And like getting to even hear your aunt, and in that final episode of the season, like I was just, joking a little bit earlier with our team of just like how my preconceived notion of like what a nun, a sister would be as an interview. I'm like, oh no, I want to hang and like have a beer with this lady. She is so awesome. Like I wish she was my aunt and godmother. She is so amazing. But I also see why you are a lot of the way that you are. And I think that was the beauty of this season too. Like we got to learn so much more about you. Just through the people who have influenced you.
That's so generous of you to say. And I tell you what, I was stressed out about something. I couldn't sleep, and my aunt's on the East Coast. And at 4:30 this morning, I texted her. And I was like, I need to call my lifeline here. And she was like, we're doing prayers. You can call me in 45 minutes. I was like, add some extra prayers for me to the big pug in the sky. Like I mess with her about not really all the way believing in that stuff anyway. And so, and she was totally there for me. And you're right. Like she's an amazing human being. And I've just been so fortunate, right? It's like how lucky. And for all of us that we help each other, see things that we're not noticing and, have a different perspective on things. That's what it's all about, right? We're just all in Earth School, And
I think what also I noticed in just those conversations, just the different work that all the different people do. So I think that's just also a lesson in terms of how we surround ourselves with the right kind of people that are going to help to educate us in different ways. Like you don't want all your friends to be exactly the same way because you're not going to get the most out of that experience. If you have people who are coming from diverse backgrounds or are working on different kinds of things, it's going to open up your perspective to the world and also just how you do business too.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I thought it's definitely a risk bringing in people from the military, but I'm like, give them a minute because they'll blow you away. And their leadership examples are just so, and their challenges were so profound for me to hear.
Yeah. Well, I encourage everybody to check out Unleashing Social Change, the podcast. Also, make sure you get the Impact with Integrity book, Repair the World Without Breaking Yourself. But before we wrap up here, I wanted to, also give you the opportunity to talk about some of the things that have been going really well. Obviously, the book being just released, I'm sure, is one of them. But yeah, can you tell us, what's been going on in your world that we can help celebrate?
I think the book is the main thing. The book is the main thing. What we're trying to do now, I've put on retainer a global business developer. This is my friend Jonathan Gray, and so he's like introducing us to people in Singapore and Australia and England and Scotland, and so we're really expanding internationally, and I feel very excited about that. It's more time away from the kids, but it's back to that kind of snake eating a gopher thing. We're like, all right, I got to go to Singapore for a week, and then when I'm there, it's like 30-hour days. But then when I come home, I can just really relax, and I like that rhythm a lot. So I'm excited that we'll have more of that set up internationally soon.
That's beautiful. Well, how can we stay updated on everything that's happening with the Billions Institute, with you, social media wise, website wise? Where can people stay updated?
Yeah, if you look for Billions Institute on the Facebooks or the Twitter or whatever, we're not on Insta, and we're like joking about being I love TikTok. When you asked what's my TikTok handle, I was like, I'm an aspiring TikTok influencer who's never done a TikTok. And then our website, billionsinstitute.com, and we have a newsletter where we try not to, bother people, but there's, just resources and things that are available for people. And even we post jobs that people have in the social sector and musings and things so the newsletter is probably the most reliable way to stay in touch.
Well, one, I appreciate you for, coming here and being part of Entrepreneur Struggle. Two, I just really appreciate what you're doing in the world, not only just with what you're doing for the causes that you're championing, but also helping these other folks who are trying to champion their own causes. Mm-hmm. I think it's really beautiful what you're doing with the Billions Institute, and also what you're doing with the book too, and helping us learn how to take better care of ourselves. I think, and you talk about this in your podcast and other areas where just as activists, a lot of times we'll get into this mode of like, we just have to go, because like anytime that we're not working on that project or a particular topic, we're wasting time, or we're not, fully fulfilling our purpose. But if you're not taking care of yourself, you're going to burn out, and it's not going to do anybody any good. So I really appreciate the book as well for really helping those like myself and others who are really trying to figure out how to do this in a healthy way.
Amen. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. I just remember too, you can get the first chapter for free on our website, billionsinstitute.com/books. First chapter, see if it's for you.
Perfect. Well, again, thank you so much, Becky. And for those of you who are here on the live stream, you are going to be able to get this as a podcast. It's going to be coming out in a few weeks. I believe it's June 20th, but I might be forgetting off the top of my head. But you can obviously encourage others to check this out here on YouTube, but also on all podcasting platforms. I really appreciate you being here. Also, our audience being here to check this out. And until our next conversation, stay safe and stay healthy, because the struggle is real. Mm-hmm. All right. So I just ended.